Thomas walked slowly beside his wooden wagon, his boots making soft sounds on the cold morning ground. The old shepherd had been away for 3 long months in the high mountains with his sheep. Now winter was coming, and it was time to go back. To the warm valleys below, the morning air was very cold. Thomas could see his breath like small white clouds. His sheep were walking quietly behind him, their thick wool keeping them warm. Thomas had done this journey many times before, but today felt different somehow. As he reached his wagon to check his supplies, Thomas heard something that made him stop walking. It was a soft sound, like a baby crying. His heart began to beat faster. Who could be making that sound out here in this lonely place, so far from any town or village? Thomas looked round the empty hills and listened carefully. The sound came again, and this time he was sure. It was definitely a baby crying, and the sound was coming from inside his wagon. He walked quickly to the back of his wagon and pulled back the heavy canvas covering. What he saw inside made him gasp and step backward in surprise. A young woman lay curled up in the corner of his wagon like a frightened animal. She was holding two tiny babies close to her chest, trying to keep them warm with her own body. Her clothes were torn and very dirty. Her long brown hair was messy and full of leaves and dirt. Her face was pale and thin, with dark purple circles under her eyes that showed she had not slept properly for many days. The woman's eyes flew open when she saw Thomas looking down at her. Pure fear filled her face, the kind of fear that comes from terrible experiences. She pulled the babies even closer to her body and tried to make herself smaller in the corner of the wagon. "Please," she whispered, her voice shaking like a leaf in the wind. "Please don't hurt my children. They're just babies. They haven't done anything wrong. Take me if you want, but please leave them alone." Thomas felt his heart break at the terror in her voice. This woman had been hurt badly by someone, and now she was afraid of every person she met. He could see that she was ready to fight like a wild animal to protect her babies. Even though she was weak and tired, he raised his hands slowly to show he had no weapons and meant no harm. "I won't hurt you," he said in the gentlest voice he could manage. "My name is Thomas. This is my wagon. You're safe here with me." The woman stared at him for a long moment, searching his weathered face for any sign of danger. She had learned not to trust anyone, especially men. But something in Thomas's kind brown eyes and gentle manner made her shoulders relax just a little bit. "I'm Emma," she said quietly, still watching him carefully. "These are my babies, little James and Rose. We had nowhere else to go. I'm sorry for taking shelter in your wagon without asking." Thomas could see that Emma was very weak and sick. She was much too thin, and her skin was pale like someone who had not eaten properly for weeks. The babies looked hungry and cold, wrapped in thin blankets that were not warm enough for the mountain weather. One of the babies, a little boy with soft brown hair, began to cry again. Emma tried to comfort him, but Thomas could see that she barely had the strength to hold him without saying another word. Thomas reached for his leather water bottle and a piece of fresh bread from his pack. He also pulled out a thick woolen blanket that he used when sleeping under the stars. "Here," he said softly, offering the food and water to Emma. "You need to eat something, and the little ones need their mother to be strong and healthy." Emma's hands were shaking as she took the water bottle. She drank slowly, as if she had not had clean water for days. Thomas could see tears forming in her eyes, but they were not tears of fear anymore. They were tears of relief and gratitude. As Emma ate the bread with small, careful bites, Thomas wondered what terrible thing had brought a mother and her twin babies to sleep in a stranger's wagon in the middle of nowhere. What kind of danger was she running from? Why was she so afraid? But he knew that these questions would have to wait for another time. The babies had stopped crying now that their mother was drinking water and eating. Thomas could see that they were beautiful children, probably about 6 months old. The little girl had bright blue eyes like her mother, while the boy had darker eyes and thicker hair. For now, the only thing that mattered was helping this small family who had found shelter in his simple wagon. Thomas had always believed that when someone needed help, you helped them first and asked questions later. These 3 people needed his help more than anyone he had ever met. As Emma finished eating the bread, she looked up at Thomas with eyes that were still afraid but also hopeful. "Thank you," she whispered. "We haven't eaten in 2 days." Thomas nodded and began making plans in his mind. His cottage was still half a day's walk away. But Emma was too weak to walk that far. He would have to make room in the wagon for all of them. Thomas helped Emma climb down from the wagon very carefully, making sure she did not fall or hurt herself. She was still weak from days of not eating properly, and her legs shook as her feet touched the ground. He then gently lifted little James from her arms, and Emma carefully carried Rose as they walked toward his home. His small stone cottage sat on top of a green hill like a picture from a fairy tale book. The walls were made of grey stones that Thomas had gathered from the mountain streams many years ago. Smoke was coming from the chimney, and warm yellow light glowed in the windows. Round the cottage were fields of soft green grass where Thomas's sheep grazed peacefully in the afternoon sun. Emma stopped walking when she saw the cottage. It looked so warm and safe, so different from the cold, scary places where she had been hiding with her babies for weeks. She had almost forgotten that places like this existed in the world. "You can stay here as long as you need," Thomas told Emma as he opened his front door. The smell of bread and warm soup came from inside the cottage. "There's a warm bed and plenty of food. You don't have to worry about anything." Emma stood at the doorway for a long moment, still holding Rose tightly in her arms. Her eyes looked round nervously, as if she expected something bad to happen. She had learned not to trust good things because they always seemed to disappear. "Why are you helping us?" she asked Thomas, her voice full of confusion. "You don't even know who we are. We could be dangerous people. We could cause trouble for you." Thomas looked at Emma's thin face and saw the fear that lived in her eyes. He thought about all the lost sheep he had found over the years, frightened and alone, in the mountains. He had never asked those sheep why they needed help. He had simply helped them because it was the right thing to do. Because everyone deserves kindness, especially when they need it most, Thomas said with a sad but gentle smile. "And because I can see that you're a good mother who loves her children very much." Over the next few days, Thomas took care of the little family as if they were his own blood relatives. He had learned many things about healing during his years as a shepherd. When sheep got hurt by wild animals or cut themselves on sharp rocks, Thomas knew how to clean their wounds and help them get better. He used these same skills to help Emma, very gently. He cleaned the small cuts on her hands and arms with warm water and soft cloth. He made a healing mixture from plants that grew wild on the mountain, the same mixture he used for his sheep. Emma was surprised that such a rough-looking man could have such gentle hands. Thomas warmed fresh milk from his goats for the babies and fed them with a small wooden spoon he carved just for them. When James and Rose had full bellies, they began to smile and laugh for the first time in weeks. Thomas spent hours carving small wooden toys for them, a little sheep, a tiny bird, and smooth round balls they could hold in their small hands. Emma watched Thomas with growing wonder. She had almost forgotten that men could be gentle and kind. For so long, she had known only men who were angry and cruel. But Thomas was different. when James cried in the middle of the night. Thomas would get up from his warm bed without complaining. He would walk the baby around the small cottage, humming old shepherd songs in his deep, quiet voice until James fell asleep in his arms during the day. Emma helped Thomas with simple tasks round the cottage. She was still too weak to do heavy work, but she could prepare vegetables for a soup and mend tears in Thomas's old clothes. Working beside him felt peaceful and safe, slowly. Like a flower opening its petals to the sun, Emma began to tell Thomas small pieces of her story. She spoke very carefully, like someone walking on broken glass who was afraid of getting cut. I was married before. She said one evening as they sat by the warm fire after the babies had gone to sleep. The orange flames danced in the fireplace, making soft shadows on the walls, to a very good man named William. He was James and Rose's father. Her voice became very quiet, almost a whisper. William died in an accident at the mill where he worked. That's when everything in my life changed. Thomas listened without asking any questions. He could see that talking about these memories was very painful for Emma. He simply sat quietly and let her speak at her own speed, giving her all the time she needed to share her pain after William died. I was very sad and very alone, Emma continued, staring into the fire. I had no money and 2 babies to feed. That's when I met another man. His name was Robert. At first, he seemed kind and helpful. He said he wanted to take care of me and the children. But Emma's voice trailed off like smoke disappearing into the air. She couldn't finish the sentence. But Thomas understood from the fear in her eyes that Robert had not been kind at all. You don't have to tell me everything right now, Thomas said gently, his voice full of understanding. What matters most is that you and the children are safe here with me. For the first time in many months, Emma felt the tight knot of fear in her chest begin to loosen just a little bit. 3 weeks passed like a gentle dream in the little cottage on the hill. Each day, Emma grew a little stronger and a little more hopeful. The dark circles under her eyes slowly disappeared, and her thin face began to fill out from eating Thomas's good food. Her hands, which had been shaking with fear when she first arrived, became steady again as she helped with simple tasks round the cottage. The babies changed even more during those peaceful weeks. Little James learned to sit up by himself and loved to play with the wooden blocks that Thomas had carved for him. He would stack them up carefully, then knock them down and clap his hands with joy. Rose had grown chubby and healthy, and she would clap her tiny hands and giggle whenever she saw the white sheep grazing in the green fields round the cottage. Emma even started to smile again, something she had not done since William died. She would laugh when James tried to catch the barn cat, and she would sing soft lullabies to Rose in the evenings. She helped Thomas with cooking and cleaning, and slowly began to believe that maybe, just maybe, her terrible nightmare was finally over. Thomas watched Emma become happy again, and it filled his heart with warm feelings he had not felt for many years. He had lived alone for so long that he had forgotten how nice it was to have a family to care for. In the mornings, he would wake up to the sound of the babies babbling in their wooden cradle, and in the evenings, he would sit by the fire with Emma while she mended his old shirts. But on a cold Tuesday morning in early winter, everything changed in the worst possible way. Emma was outside behind the cottage, hanging wet clothes on a rope line to dry in the cold air. The white sheets and baby clothes flapped in the mountain wind like flags of peace. She was humming a song that William used to sing to her, feeling more hopeful than she had in months. Then she looked down the hill and saw them. 3 men on black horses were riding up the winding path toward the cottage. They were still far away, But Emma could see them clearly against the grey winter sky. Her face went white as fresh snow when she recognized the man riding in front. Her hands began to shake so badly that she dropped the wet clothes she was holding onto the cold ground. No, she whispered to herself, backing away from the clothesline. No, 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 this can't be happening. The fear that had been sleeping peacefully inside her chest for 3 weeks suddenly woke up like a dangerous animal. Her heart started beating so fast that she could hear it in her ears. And her breathing became quick and shallow. Thomas was inside the cottage, repairing a broken chair, when he heard Emma's cry of terror from outside. He dropped his tools and ran as fast as his old legs could carry him. When he found Emma behind the cottage, she was shaking so hard that she could barely stand up. Her face was pale, and her eyes were wide with the same fear he had seen on that first day in his wagon. "It's Robert," she said, her voice filled with panic and despair. "He found us. He found us. I knew this day would come. But I hoped we had more time." Thomas looked down the hill at the 3 approaching ladders. The man in front was well dressed in expensive clothes and a fine black coat. He rode his horse like someone who was used to getting his way in everything. Even from a distance, Thomas could see that the man's face was hard and angry, like stone carved by an artist who only knew how to make cruel expressions. "Take the babies and go inside right now," Thomas told Emma in a firm, gentle voice. "Lock the door from the inside and don't come out until I tell you it's safe. You don't understand," Emma said, grabbing Thomas's arm with both hands. Her fingers were cold and shaking. "Robert is not just mean or cruel like some men. He's truly dangerous. When he found out that James and Rose weren't his own children, when he learned they were William's babies, he hurt me very badly. He said terrible things and did terrible things." Emma's voice became even quieter, and Thomas had to lean close to hear her words. "And when I tried to leave him the first time, when I packed a bag and tried to run away, he caught me. He said he would kill me with his own hands before he would let another man raise William's children. He said I belonged to him forever, whether I wanted to or not." Thomas felt hot anger rise up in his chest like fire, but he kept his voice calm and steady. He had learned over many years that getting angry never solved problems. It only made them bigger. "I won't let him hurt you or the babies," Thomas said, looking directly into Emma's frightened eyes. "I promise you that with my whole heart. You are under my protection now, and I will not break that promise." Robert rode his black horse right up to the front of the cottage, and his 2 friends stopped beside him. He had a cold, cruel smile on his face, like a cat that had finally caught a mouse it had been chasing for a long time. "Well, well, well," Robert said in a voice that sounded pleasant but felt dangerous, like ice that looked solid but would break if you stepped on it. That night, after Robert and his men had ridden away with their terrible threats, Thomas and Emma sat by the warm fire in the cottage making plans. The orange flames danced in the fireplace, but neither of them felt the comfort they usually found in the fire's glow. The babies were sleeping peacefully in their wooden cradle, not knowing that danger was coming closer with each passing hour. Emma had finally told Thomas the whole terrible truth about Robert. She spoke in whispers, as if saying the words too loudly might make Robert appear in the room like an evil spirit. She told Thomas how Robert had forced her to marry him after William died, using her grief and fear to trap her. She explained how he had threatened to hurt little James and Rose if she ever tried to leave him, and how she had finally found the courage to run away in the middle of the night when she couldn't take his cruelty anymore. "Robert has a lot of money and important friends in this county," Emma said sadly. staring into the fire with worried eyes. He knows the judge and many of the business owners in town. The sheriff might believe Robert's lies instead of our truth, especially since Robert can make his story sound believable. Thomas sat quietly for a moment, thinking hard about their problem. His weathered hands were folded in his lap, and his kind eyes reflected the firelight as his mind worked like a puzzle box, trying to find the right solution. Then we need to make sure the truth is heard by everyone, not just the sheriff, Thomas said finally. Robert may have money and a few powerful friends, but I have something more valuable. I have the trust of good, honest people who know right from wrong. Emma looked at Thomas with confusion. What do you mean? I mean that tomorrow, when Robert comes back. He won't be facing just one old shepherd, Thomas said with a gentle but determined smile. He'll be facing an entire community of people who care about what's right. That night, while Emma slept fitfully in the cottage with the babies, Thomas did something he had never done before. He walked through the darkness to every farm and every house in the valley below. He knocked on doors and woke up neighbors he had known for many years. He told them Emma's story and asked them to come to his cottage in the morning to witness the truth. The next morning came grey and cold, with clouds hanging low over the hills like a heavy blanket. Just as he had promised, Robert returned to the cottage. But this time, he was not alone. He brought Sheriff Peters, a tired-looking man with grey hair and serious eyes, along with 6 other men who worked for Robert and did whatever he told them to do. Thomas was waiting in front of the cottage, standing calm and steady like an old tree that had weathered many storms. His sheepdog sat beside him, sensing the tension in the air but staying loyal to his master. Sheriff Peters, Thomas said, nodding respectfully to the lawman. Thomas had known the sheriff for many years and had always found him to be a fair and honest man, even if he sometimes had to deal with difficult people like Robert. I know you to be a man who believes in justice and truth. Before you make any decisions about what to do here, I think you should hear from some other people who have important things to say. Robert's face twisted with anger like a piece of cloth being wrung out. His eyes flashed with rage, and his voice became loud and harsh. What people are you talking about, old man? This foolish shepherd is just trying to waste our time and cause trouble. But then, something wonderful and unexpected happened. People began coming up the hill toward the cottage from all directions. Farmers from the valley walked up the winding path, their boots making soft sounds on the frosty ground. Women from the nearby town came in their warm coats and bonnets, even Reverend Miller, the local minister, climbed the hill with his walking stick, breathing heavily from the effort. Thomas had spent the entire night visiting everyone he knew, asking them to come and witness the truth. And now they were here, more than 20 people who cared about justice and protecting those who couldn't protect themselves. Mrs. Helen, who ran the general store in town, stepped forward first. She was a strong woman with grey hair and honest eyes who had never been afraid to speak the truth, even when it was difficult. Sheriff Peters, she said in a clear, firm voice, I've known Robert for many years, and I need to tell you something important. He has been cruel to every woman who has ever worked for him. 3 of my closest friends had to quit their jobs at his house because of the terrible way he treated them. He would shout at them, refuse to pay them what he owed, and say horrible things that made them cry. Old Farmer Jack, whose hands were rough from years of hard work in the fields, spoke next. His voice shook a little, not from fear, but from anger at the memories he was sharing. Robert tried to force my daughter Mary to marry him right after her husband died in the war, Jack said, his weathered face serious and sad. When Mary refused because she was still grieving. Robert threatened to ruin my farm and take away my land. He said he had enough money and power to destroy our family if we didn't do what he wanted. One by one, more people stepped forward to share their stories about Robert. Spring came early that year, like nature was celebrating the happiness that had finally come to the little cottage on the hill. The grey winter hill suddenly burst into color with thousands of wildflowers, yellow daisies, purple violets, and white mountain roses that smelled sweet in the warm air. Fresh green grass covered the fields like a soft carpet, and the sheep grazed peacefully in the sunshine. Emma had grown strong and healthy during the quiet months after Robert was taken away by the sheriff. Her thin face had filled out from eating Thomas's good cooking, and her eyes sparkled with life again. The dark shadows of fear that had lived in her face for so long were completely gone, replaced by a bright, real smile that made Thomas's heart feel warm every time he saw it. Little James had learned to walk during those happy spring months, taking his first wobbly steps across the cottage floor while holding onto chairs and tables for support. He would stumble and fall down, then get back up with a big grin on his face and try again. Rose had grown into a chubby, happy baby who babbled constantly in her own special language and clapped her tiny hands whenever she saw something that made her excited. Both children loved to play in the garden behind the cottage with the wooden toys that Thomas had carved for them with his own hands. They had little wooden sheep, birds, and balls that they could roll across the grass while Thomas and Emma watched them with joy. Thomas, Emma said one warm morning as they sat on a wooden bench watching James chase butterflies while Rose played with flower petals in the grass, "I need to tell you something important." Thomas looked at Emma with his gentle brown eyes, ready to listen carefully as he always did. Over the months, he had learned that when Emma said she needed to tell him something, it was always worth hearing. "When I first ran away from Robert, with the babies," Emma said, choosing her words carefully, "I thought I was just trying to survive each day. I never imagined that I would find not just safety from danger, but a real home where I belonged. And not just a home, but—" She paused, her cheeks turning pink like the roses in the garden. "But real love." Thomas felt his heart fill with warmth like sunshine spreading through his chest. Over the long months of caring for Emma and the children, his feelings had grown and changed. What had started as simple kindness and protection had slowly become something much deeper. He loved Emma with all his heart, and he loved James and Rose as if they were his own children. But he had never wanted to tell Emma about these feelings because he was afraid of making her feel pressured or unsafe. "Emma," Thomas said softly, taking her hand in his weathered fingers, "I love you and the children more than I ever thought it was possible to love anyone. But I want you to know that there's no pressure at all. You can stay here as my family for as long as you want. Whether we marry or not, you never have to worry about having a safe place to live." Emma's eyes filled with happy tears that sparkled like dewdrops in the morning sun. "Thomas," she said, her voice full of emotion, "you saved my life in every way that a person can be saved. You gave me safety when I was in danger, food when I was hungry, and hope when I thought there was no hope left in the world. I would be honored and proud to be your wife." On a beautiful Saturday morning in May, when the mountain air was warm and sweet with the smell of blooming flowers, Thomas and Emma were married in the little white church in town. The church was packed with people, the same neighbors and friends who had stood up to Robert and helped save Emma from his cruelty. Now, they were all there to celebrate as the kind shepherd and the brave mother promised to love each other for the rest of their lives. Little James, who was now walking steadily, toddled down the church aisle in his best clothes, dropping white flower petals from a small basket while everyone smiled and laughed. Rose sat in Emma's arms wearing a tiny white dress, clapping her hands with delight at all the happy faces round her. The whole town seemed to be there, smiling and cheering for the family that had found each other through kindness and courage. Even the church bells rang out across the valley, announcing to everyone that something wonderful was happening as the warm summer months arrived. Emma began teaching James and Rose to help Thomas care for his sheep. Every morning, the little family would walk together through the green fields, and the children would learn to be gentle with the baby lambs. Their laughter echoed across the hills like music as they played games and helped gather the woolly flock when evening came. "Mama," James said one day, pointing at Thomas with his small finger. "Papa sheep happy?" Emma laughed and picked up her son, hugging him tightly. "Yes, my darling boy, Papa is very happy, and so are we." That evening, as Thomas and Emma sat together on their wooden porch watching the sunset paint the sky in soft colors, if pink and gold, Emma thought about how completely their lives had changed. "I used to think I was broken forever," she said quietly. "I thought I would never be whole again." Thomas squeezed her hand gently. "You were never broken. You were just wounded. And wounds can heal when they're tended with love."